Number 10, Deadpool? Okay, so not really Deadpool, more like DC's parody version of Marvel's parody character. You know who I'm talking about, it's Red Tool. Red Tool is a mercenary who only fights with power tools, and while he doesn't appear to have regenerative powers, can definitely still take a beating. In fact, he even got beat himself up by Harley Quinn after having his phone number tattooed on her butt and arranging to surprise her for a wedding. People have always thought Harley and Deadpool would make a great match, which is where Red Tool and his sudden romantic inclination come in. Of course, for Harley, it would take more convincing than a surprise wedding. She beat Red Tool to the point that he was knocked unconscious, proving that in DC's opinion, Harley could make quick work of Marvel's Deadpool besides at least their parody of him. However, Harley did ultimately decide to team up with Red Tool after he came to and they were surrounded by the GCPD. Fortunately, his wedding present to Harley was the perfect ticket out of this predicament. I kind of love Red Tool and Harley Quinn together too. They're pretty cute. Also just like Red Tool in general with his little tool speech bubbles. Number 9, Manos. Manos is the wielder of the Infinity Rings. So yeah, you guessed it. He's a parody of Marvel's Thanos. But just because he's a parody doesn't mean he's not powerful. He still wields those super powerful rings and is super evil, leading to Power Girl to want to take him on when both she and Harley seek him out on their adventure together. While Manos is busy monologuing about just how epically he is going to destroy them both, Harley Quinn manages to steal the rings off his fingers without him noticing, and then accidentally kills him with the rings, to boot. She didn't know they were loaded, you know, so it's not really her fault there. Should this be possible? Probably not. Is it hilarious? You betcha. How did she even steal those rings without him noticing? That's what I want to know. Number 8, Lobo. In Injustice Gods Among Us, Harley Quinn is working some stuff out after Joker is gone and ends up stealing Lobo's flying motorcycle. This ends about as well as you could imagine, with Harley being chased all over by the crazy, overly violent parody of a tough 90s guy. Lobo having the power to regenerate and Harley Quinn being a normal human would mean you'd think that she'd never be able to beat him. But you'd be wrong. Armed with Lex Luthor's super strength and durability pills and her knowledge of psychology, Harley ends up convincing Black Canary and Green Arrow to team up with her and then makes quick work of her pursuer. And then of course, using her psychology, she's like, yeah, this isn't really about me, is it, Lobo? And Lobo's like, it's not, you're right. And before we move on to our next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it and if you love Harley Quinn as much as I do. Number 7, Old Lady Harley. Old Lady Harley is a version who exists in a DC alternate future created to parody Marvel's Old Man Logan universe. Here, Harley Quinn as an old lady ends up leaving NYC but is dragged back to it years later by Red Tool. Tool brings her back to her old pal Tony, who has had her brought back because, well, they need her help. Brainiac 5 attacked the Earth a while ago, creating this kind of apocalyptic wasteland that we're in. However, the gang of Harleys were able to fend him off. Shortly afterward, though, they turned on one another, vying for ownership over NYC and dividing up into the gangs of Harleys, who divided up rulership of New York between them. It has finally come down to this final battle, where the winner takes all, and to avoid things getting messy, Harley has been called in to put a stop to this fight, save the Harleys from each other, and win the benevolent rulership of NYC, because obviously Harley would be the best person to rule it. Harley succeeds, of course, and uploads a copy of her consciousness to Cy's old cyborg head, since he himself is dead and not really using it anymore. Using that tech, she's able to guide the Harleys and protect New York, even when she isn't there, freeing her up physically to get the hell out of Dodge and continue on her own adventures. Number 6, Ulysses Highwater. Ulysses was Hell's very own bounty hunter who pursued Harley after she managed to break out of her own personal circle of torment in the steamy underworld. I don't know why I called it a steamy underworld, because it's hell and it's not nice. I feel like steamy makes it sound a lot nicer than it actually is. She was back with her crew, the Quintets, and while Ulysses was a powerful demon who wielded guns and magic smoke and magic bullets, Harley found a way to outsmart him. I just love that this is more often than not Harley's tactic. In a typical psychologist play, she simply found a bounty that Highwater craved more and used it to manipulate him. He caught her, but she found a way to manipulate her tormentor, Petite, and then get back to Ulysses to offer him the bounty of his dreams so that she might escape his ire. Pretty brilliant, really. It didn't end up working out for Highwater, but in the end, it definitely worked out for Quinn.
Number 5. Green Lantern. There was some interference on this fight, which as you may have guessed by now usually happens with Harley, but regardless, Harley was definitely in the process of winning when the interference really helped her to crush her enemy, who in this case was Green Lantern Hal Jordan. That's right, Harley won in a cosmic arm wrestling match against Hal. In Harley's little black book in issue number 2, the two characters square off when Harley, after being outbid for a genuine Green Lantern ring online, instead gets her hands on something better, a black and red lantern ring. How fitting. It is a combined ring formed from both colors of lanterns. In the end, red and black lantern Harley defeats Hal only to have her ring taken. Hal knocked out and is of course kind of forced to don his Green Lantern ring in order to help save the day. Another fun team up for the books, or the little black book, I suppose I should say.
Number 4. Adolf. I mean, this one is just super surprising because Harley would need a time machine or something to even get back in time to the leader of the German forces during World War II, yeah? Or you might just need Superman's balls. No, not those balls. These balls! Harley managed to swipe these Kryptonian power orbs while she was in Superman's Fortress of Solitude. The green ones allow you to time travel, which sends Harley back in time to, well, an alternate timeline that basically looks a lot like DC's Bombshells, in this case. In fact, it pretty much is DC's Bombshells. Harley goes back there and surprisingly not only runs into and defeats Adolf, but manages to defeat a bunch of armed soldiers besides. It's all pretty impressive, actually. She also gets to kiss herself. Her bombshell self. Her bombshell self is gross.
Number 3. Prime Earth. Since the Batman animated series version of Harley Quinn is technically the original, Prime Earth Harley Quinn, oddly enough, kinda counts as an alternate. This version of Harley is currently an ally of the Bat family and operates more as a vigilante in Gotham than a criminal. Currently, this is probably the most heroic version we have seen of Harley Quinn in the main continuity of the comics. Harley operates almost as a Batman sidekick following the events of Joker War, and even during that event, if it wasn't for Harley, Batman actually might not be alive today. Harley was the one to help Bats after he was infected with Punchline's special brew of Joker venom, which made him quite sick and caused him to severely hallucinate, struggling to discern reality from deranged fantasy. If anything, Gotham would at least be in a lot of trouble if Harley hadn't helped him. I feel like Batman might still be tripping out.
Number 2. Death. Not like the character death, but the actual concept itself. In the 2000 Harley Quinn solo series, we see Harley die and go to hell, but you already knew that from my point about Hell's best bounty hunter, Ulysses Highwater. To continue on from that point, Harley doesn't only defeat Highwater in the end by piecing together what he really wants and why and getting it for him, but in doing so, she also manages to escape hell and death itself. You see, Harley wants to help Highwater reconnect with his son as he's hunting down the man who stole him away. His lover, Nathan Drum. His son's lover, not his lover, who he blames for actually corrupting his son. Harley finds out, unsurprisingly, that Highwater's son and Drum are of course not in hell, but somewhere likely much better. The other place perhaps being heaven. She offers Highwater their whereabouts, but makes him promise not to punish either of them for finding love with one another. However, just as Highwater seems to agree and assures Harley that he actually loves his son very much, and so he wouldn't do that anyways, Etrigan shows up and kicks Harley out of hell. You see, she's just too much of a nuisance to remain there. After all, people aren't supposed to find things like love and forgiveness during their stay in hell. So yeah, he rhymes her the heck out of there, and then squeezes Loot Harley. He's like, you're too annoying. The Ballad of Harley Quinn. Number 1, the Trinity. Harley Quinn has not only managed to defeat all of those superheroes individually, but even managed to defeat them all together, what we refer to as the DC Holy Trinity of superheroes. In Heroes in Crisis, she manages to make quick work of them, using them against one another. She gets close enough to Diana, hugging her and confessing that she was not the one to blame for the tragedy at Sanctuary, so that she can get her hands on her lasso of truth. Haha. She then uses that to tie up Batman, threatening to break his neck with the lasso while using it to question him. She asks him if he has anything on him that, could be used against Superman. And paranoid old Batman, he definitely does. He has a bit of kryptonite in his belt, he tells her. She takes that and uses it to defeat Superman, taking off and escaping before anyone is able to do anything. Honestly, I'm actually really surprised that Wonder Woman didn't really do more here, because I feel like Diana definitely had the opportunity. But I guess, once you're holding Batman hostage, it's like, not much you can do because they're like, we don't want Batman to die. So, fair.
Number 10. Captain Carrot. These two fought it out in the two-parter Convergence Harley Quinn. After all, it would take a melding of multiversal realities in order for these two to even be able to fight one another, as Captain Carrot hails from the alternate Earth of Earth 26. While this fight might not seem like anything to celebrate, it should be noted that Captain Carrot is actually pretty powerful. He possesses one of the most epic powers, I think, of all time, that of cartoon physics. I don't know about you, but being able to defy the law of physics that govern matter and molecules in our world sounds pretty powerful to me. While the physical kind of fight came to a stalemate, in the end it would appear as though Harley won without really meaning to when she offered Captain Carrot snacks from her friend Poison Ivy's garden. In other words, those carrots are probably all kinds of toxic. Although Harley also joined Captain Carrot in a quick snack, the poison would not actually affect her, as thanks to Ivy she has total immunity. Captain Carrot, however, looked like he wasn't doing great. He was like, ugh, poisonous garden. Number 9. Damien Wayne. Harley Quinn made quick work of Damien Wayne, aka Robin, in the Harley Quinn animated series. Here Harley was looking to make a name for herself as a supervillain and leader of her own criminal gang, striking out on her own. She wanted to take Joker's spot as Batman's top nemesis, and even managed to steal Batman's Batmobile in hopes of baiting him out. Unfortunately for Harley, it wasn't Bats who answered the call, but instead Bats Jr., aka Damien Wayne. Harley was very disappointed and refused to even really fight Damien, despite him claiming that he was a more than worthy nemesis for her, being trained by birth by the League of Assassins. Harley defeated him far too easily, hanging him by his cape on a meat hook in the warehouse that they were in. Although Damien of course later embellished the story and insisted that Harley and he were official nemeses. Also, I love Damien Wayne in the Harley Quinn animated series. I think it's my favorite incarnation of Damien Wayne. Damien Wayne fans, please don't hate me. I mean that with the utmost respect. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, more Harley lists, yes, let's have it happen, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also comment below with your favorite Harley issues or Harley stories. Number 8. Black Canary. Although Black Canary ultimately prevents the fight from coming to a close in the Injustice universe, Harley is definitely about to win when this happens, and would have been crowned victor. I mean, after all, she is mid-swing with her hammer just coming down almost on Black Canary's head there. However, Black Canary at the moment of her demise halts the fight as she's about to be sick to her stomach. Harley, recognizing Black Canary's morning sickness as a symptom of her being pregnant, decides to call the whole thing off, refusing to fight someone who is pregnant due to her own history. Although a moment ago Harley was ready to smash Black Canary's head in with her giant hammer, now the two women bond over their shared experience. It turns out that while Black Canary is pregnant with the now deceased Green Arrow's child, Harley was once pregnant and gave birth to the Joker's child in secret. Honestly, this is a really fun fight that also just turns into a really heartfelt moment, which is kind of great.
Number 7. Deathstroke. Of course, this one, like Lobo, was a bit of a team effort, in fact even more of a team effort than Lobo's defeat if I'm being honest, but still, Harley fought alongside the rest of the Suicide Squad to take down Deathstroke, and it worked, so I'm counting it. They ultimately were successful and Harley did help. So yeah. Deathstroke actually was also working with the squad but ended up betraying them. Together with Black Manta and a final shot from Deadshot, Harley took down Slade Wilson, which even with help is still pretty impressive considering how usually unstoppable and undefeatable Deathstroke is considered to be. Yeah, I feel like even if you get help in defeating Deathstroke, you're still doing pretty good. If you can do it. I couldn't do it with help. I don't know, maybe unless Superman was helping me?
Number 6. Shazam. Another hero who Harley ends up taking on and surprisingly defeating in Injustice, we are talking about Shazam. I know, pretty impressive. Harley ends up fighting Shazam as both are on opposite sides of the superhero conflict, with Shazzy siding with Supes and Harl's allying herself with Batman. The two fight in year 5, but also fought previously in year 3, with Harley taking full advantage of Shazam's sweet naivete, tossing her hammer at him, which it turned out was actually a bomb. That time around, the hammer explodes in his face, knocking him out. Number 5. Future State. One of the more recent alternate versions of Harley Quinn comes from the Future State reality, which might in ways end up partly our DC main continuity future, but will also likely diverge in enough ways that it'll be considered different. So now this is kind of an alternate reality. Even though before we were promised this would be the main reality. Lies! Lies! I mean, we already know that it's going to be different in the world of Batman, especially because of how the Bat-centric Fear State event went down. In regards to Harley Quinn from Future State, here we see Harley acting more as a hero, who is forced to team up with the Magistrate and Jonathan Crane, formerly the Scarecrow, to help them capture some of Gotham's most deadly and brutal criminals and serial killers. And I gotta say, Harley Quinn's pretty good at it actually. She crushes it. Number 4. Batman. Harley Quinn has beaten Batman on more than one occasion, but for me, one of her most iconic victory moments comes from the Batman animated series, when Harley successfully traps Batman for the Joker and is planning to basically waste him. Of course, although Harley almost successfully ends Bat's life, he manages to prey on her insecurities regarding her relationship with the Joker. He convinces Harley that the Joker will be upset with her if she just wastes him without contacting him or telling him anything about it. So she calls him up, and then when he arrives, it's revealed that Batman was actually right. In provoking a fight between the two villains, Batman is able to escape, but in this scenario, if Joker hadn't been involved, Harley would have likely been completely successful in executing her Puddin's plan. This victory not only proves Harley's might next to Joker, but also is a heartbreaking one, as it illustrates how harmful her relationship with the Joker is, and how its toxicity also succeeds in often holding her brilliance and her individualism hostage.
Number 3. Wonder Woman. Sometimes you have to defeat the ones you love, for their own good and protection. That's what happened in this fight featuring Harley Quinn and Wonder Woman. Well, it was less a fight and more of a rescue slash kidnapped attempt, but still, Harley came out on top here and managed to defeat Wonder Woman. In order, of course, to rescue her. So, it was a nice defeat. Harley Quinn is actually a huge superhero fan herself, if you didn't know, especially of Wonder Woman and of Power Girl. In an attempt to protect Diana from those who were hunting her down, Harley disguised herself as a flower delivery person. And when Diana turned her back to go grab a pen to sign for the flowers, she knocked her out with a gas bomb. So yeah, it wasn't like a crazy epic fight, but still, it's pretty impressive that Harley was able to kinda pull one over on Wonder Woman there. Still beat her, gotta say.
Number 2. Superman. We don't really know how, and she didn't do it alone, but in the Black Label limited series, Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, in issue number 1, we open up on Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn being served by Superman. Together they seem to have made him their prisoner by threatening the life of Jimmy Olsen, and Superman is waiting on them in return for his whereabouts so that he can run off and save Jimmy. Of course, it all turns out that this is part of a dream, but it's a fun sequence and could actually be based on real events in this Black Label reality. Black Label comics typically happen outside of continuity, just FYI. Whether or not this was real though, Harley also took on Supes in a boxing match and won in Harley's Little Black Book in the second to last issue in issue 5. Number 1. The Trinity. If you thought the Man of Steel was too much for Harley Quinn to take on, obviously you would be wrong. And you'd actually be super wrong about that, as Harley has not only taken on Superman multiple times, but also in one fight managed to take on Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman all in one go. The holy trinity of DC supers, if you will. This all went down in Heroes in Crisis, when the superhero trio was trying to track Harley down as they believed she was behind the mass murder that went down at the Sanctuary. Harley made quick work of the team, using Batman's contingency plans even against his allies, and the team's love and affection for one another to her advantage. Number 10. Batman and Harley Quinn. While technically the version of Harley Quinn from the animated universe could be considered her original and therefore her main version, this depiction of her at least hails from a DCEU film instead of where she originally appeared, in the Batman animated series. In the animated film Batman and Harley Quinn teams up with Batman and Nightwing, who are hesitant to turn to her for assistance, but really have no other choice when it comes to finding out where Poison Ivy is, as she and the Floronic Man threaten all of humanity. Their evil plot involves turning people into plants. Talk about creating a greener Earth. Harley agrees to join up with the heroes in exchange for Batman's help in getting her reinstated and rehired as a psychologist. And technically this film, I don't even know if we know it's part of the general animated universe, so it actually could be separate from that continuity as well. I don't think it's ever clarified, but it is an animated film, which is why some people consider it part of that continuity and some people consider it outside of the continuity. Number 9. Harley Quinn, the animated series. In the Harley Quinn animated series, Harley isn't a saint per se, but she does help to save Gotham when Joker has the city in his grasp, and she also ultimately decides against using parademons to conquer Earth, despite the fact that she is currently crushing the forces of New Gotham and could probably have stood a chance to not just kill Jim Gordon, but also take over the whole planet with her parademon army at the behest of Darkseid, if she was feeling like it. And even though she had been considered worthy of joining Darkseid and conquering Earth in his name. Granted, this was also because Poison Ivy stopped her, but hey, you know, maybe in this reality it's these two women together to bring out the good in one another. Maybe that's also why they make a great romantic couple. Of course, Harley does still classify herself as a villain in this reality and aims to be an even bigger, badder one than her ex the Joker initially, but I inevitably think Harley Quinn still skews more reluctant hero or anti-hero in this universe, even if she might not label herself as such. Even if she's kind of in denial about it, I still see this Harley as a more heroic than villainous version overall. A little bit of chaotic hero, basically. Chaotic good, that's Harley Quinn. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Harley Quinn alternate lists, or you just want more heroic alternate versions of villains lists, which sure we could do a few more of those, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Black Label Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. In the DC Black Label limited series Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, Harley is out for revenge after her and the gang of Harleys Coney Island home, the Dreamin' Seaman, is burned to the ground when Big Tony forgets to keep up payments to their criminal mortgage lenders. Harley is headed back into downtown to try and deliver some payback, but also has to dodge the Birds of Prey and Officer Renee Montoya, who are working together to prevent her return for her own safety. And the Joker, who would very much like to endanger his ex, Harley Quinn's safety. In the process, Harley Quinn helps the GCPD to apprehend the Joker, manages to steal all his and other criminal stolen loot that is in his care, and hands it over to the police, which I'd say are some pretty heroic actions, even though they weren't really the main focus of Harley's visit per se. Well, this is a story that could fit in with Harley's main continuity narrative, and which I think some people have attributed to that narrative, at least during a certain time in her life, maybe a little few years ago maybe. I usually assume most of Black Label comics are kind of out of continuity, and therefore kind of like Elseworld tales that exist in their own pocket universes. So for me at least, this is an alternate tale. Number 7. Birds of Prey. Never mind just beating Black Canary, at one point Harley Quinn manages to evade the entire Birds of Prey team, including Renee Montoya in the Black Label limited series, Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. This comic gives us an alternate story for what would happen with their team up in comparison to the DCEU film. Instead of tracking down a diamond for Black Mask so that she can avoid him killing her, here Harley is aiming to take down her enemies in Gotham and ends up teaming up with the Birds of Prey to do so. But it turns out initially, neither they or the GCPD want Harley in Gotham, as she's a liability. After her brief team up with the Birds of Prey in issue number 1, she ends up captured by Renee Montoya, but gives her and the birds the slip in issue number 2, escaping custody with a secret ally by tunneling out of a restaurant bathroom. This iteration of the team includes Black Canary, Huntress, and Cassandra Cain, who we learn is actually filling in for Barbara Gordon, who's out with a broken leg. Also, if you saw the Birds of Prey film, and regardless of how you felt about it, this is a comic you should read. It's really funny, it's really great. I think it's really fun. Everything Black Label is usually pretty good. Usually. Number 6. DCEU. In the DC Extended Universe, their cinematic universe, we are introduced to a version of Harley Quinn played by Margot Robbie. While Harley definitely has a bad side here, she is also a villain with redeeming qualities. She is smart, capable, strong, and generally she's pretty lucky. The problem mainly with Harley in this universe, as we learn in David Ayer's Suicide Squad, is her attachment to the Joker. And we see that when she finds herself free of him, she ends up on a more reluctant path that leans more towards anti-hero than just straight up villain. Sure, Harley is still at times selfish, but it's clear that she cares about the general well-being of those who, like her, struggle to find a place to belong. In Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, she ends up uniting the powerful heroic group of women known as the Birds of Prey, and turning the DCEU version of thief Cassandra Cain into her own young protege after saving her life, or helping to save her life at least. She fights to defeat the baddies and help save the day. And then she goes on to prove just how noble she can be once again in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad.
Number 5, Batman. At least this one feels like a sort of fair fight because both Batman and Harley Quinn are humans without any superpowers. But when it comes to skill sets and resources, Batman is definitely working with a lot more than Harley Quinn is. Still, somehow, there have been multiple occasions where Harley has bested Batman in both the animated universe and even in the comics, and much to the chagrin usually of the Joker, proving that while Joker may have been around for longer, Harley might somehow be an even greater criminal genius in some weird twist of fate. Of course, Batman also might try to convince you that he's only lost any fight to Harley because he wanted to, and that it was all part of his master plan. But then, what else is new? Isn't that usually Batman's go-to excuse in the face of defeat? I don't know how many comics I've read where Batman's like, oh, I meant to lose. It's all part of my master plan. Okay, Bruce. Of course, if you still feel like this is too, racy or is too dangerous, let us know, and we can always try to do something different.
Number 4, Criminal Sanity. In Criminal Sanity, Dr. Harleen Quinzel starts out as a psychiatrist who is forever changed when the Joker murdered her roommate. Stealing her medical books in the process, he used the knowledge within to become, as he saw it, an artistic serial killer, tormenting his victims with what he had learned. Harleen herself became focused and obsessed on catching the Joker. She ends up joining up with the GCPD, but inevitably leaves when she feels that they are incapable of catching and stopping the Joker permanently, choosing to strike out on her own instead in order to do so. Although, that'll probably be in a part 2 to this story. Kinda ends open-ended, hoping we get more of this. While she definitely does have a darker side in this comic and in this continuity, she ultimately is working to catch the killer known as the Joker instead of joining him. So I think we can definitely consider her to be a hero, even though she's kind of obsessive. Number 3, Wonder Woman. Harley's Little Black Book really is a treat of a mini team-up series. If you're a Harley fan and you haven't read this one yet, or at least dipped your toe in, I highly recommend it. Back in issue number 1 of the series, Harley manages to defeat Wonder Woman by catching her unawares and successfully kidnapping her. Of course, Harley actually is aiming to do this for Wonder Woman's own good, and is in fact a big fan of hers, as we find out. So it isn't a malicious defeat at all. Still though, using sleeping gas, Harley manages to incapacitate Wonder Woman and swaps clothes with her in an attempt to impersonate her. In the end, this results in a glorious team-up of the two badass ladies fighting side by side. Number 2, White Knight. In the White Knight reality, Harley Quinn has become a straight-up hero. Here we see Harley Quinn become the sidekick and one true love of Jack Napier, who suffers from a sort of dissociative identity disorder where he also becomes and lives with the persona known as the Joker. Eventually, Harley leaves Jack, but when he gets the help that he needs and is able to escape his Joker side, the two actually come back together. Batman in essence becomes the antagonist of this story, having gone too far when it comes to his mission to put a stop to crime. And it is Jack and Harley who are forced to do something to put a stop to Batman's crusade. In the end, Jack dies, succumbing once more to the darkness of his Joker persona. Batman ends up in prison, and in White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, we follow Harley, who ends up teaming up with the GCPD to catch a criminal, becoming part consulting psychological criminal profiler and part straight up vigilante. Doing it all while also working to protect her 2 babies, her pet hyenas that is, and her 2 twin human babies, her children with Jack, conceived before his demise. Number 1, Injustice. While initially Harley started out as kinda one of the baddest of bads in this universe, she does inevitably end up becoming one of the best when it comes to heroes. So good in fact she even ends up joining up with the Justice League. Harley Quinn in Injustice by the end is 100% a hero and ends up allied with Batman when it comes to the split between Bruce and Clark Kent, aka Superman. Superman of course goes on to become a fascist tyrant and pretty much the villain of this narrative, who rules with an iron fist, where Batman fights for the freedom of heroes and for the freedom of the world, believing that even if people choose to be criminals, they should ultimately get to make that choice themselves. Harley too agrees, believing that people should be given the choice to choose, and like in her case, believes they should also be given the opportunity to possibly change. Because you know, Harley used to be a criminal and now she's more of a hero.